Good evening, Bermuda, and welcome to the first episode of Education Connection. I'm Alicia Trott with the Department of Communications, and today I am joined by the Minister of Education, the Honorable Diallo Rabane, and our Director of Academics, Dr. Simmons. We are very excited for this first episode. Today, we were originally scheduled to be joined by a counselor and a psychologist. However, due to circumstances outside of our control, they aren't able to join us, but we do look to having them on an upcoming episode. But today, we have Dr. Simmons and the Minister prepared to share with you about managing remote learning, some goal setting for our students. And this is an interactive show, so please feel free to ask questions in the comments. We may not get to all of the questions today, although we will try. However, we will be recording all of your questions, and we do plan to submit updates and answers to those questions via our social media platforms, and the Department of Education sends out the scoop. So parents, I hope that you are tuned in. At this time, I'm going to hand over to the minister so that he can give us a warm welcome for the evening. Minister?
And thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Dr. Simmons, for joining us. And welcome, Bermuda, as we start with this inaugural session of Education Connection. The purpose of this is to give the public an opportunity to not only answer questions, but to get the Department of Education and the Ministry of Education an opportunity to let you know what's going on and answer the questions that you may have. Today's session, where unfortunately we've had to start our school year on the remote learning circumstances. And while we do recognize that the most important place for our children is in the classroom learning, we also have to take into account what is going on in our country with our COVID crisis and opening our schools in a safe fashion so they not only are there for our children, but they remain open because we've put the things in place. And so with that, we've decided to have this inaugural session to talk about a little bit about coping skills with remote learning, um, and some of the tips that you can have in order to make it a more enjoyable experience. How to deal with some of the issues that you might be having, and so I just want to start off first with something that we call goal setting. Goal setting, and there are 5 tips of key elements of goal setting to help making your experience at home a much smoother experience than what you may be than you may have be having now. The first of the key elements is starting early. We recognize that starting early should begin as young as preschool, even before that, if you can, nursery. Because while students may not be ready to set the individual academic goals, teachers can set the classroom-wide goals for behavior and skill development. This will help to give your child the foundation in order to grow into their academic career. Do it often. Short-term goals, usually lasting no longer than 4 to 6 weeks. Enable frequent check-ins with students. This allows the frequent revision of goals based on student progress and preventing students from feeling discouraged. Those of us, I know it does take some time to just check in with your children, see how they're doing, understand what it is they're working towards, and come up with ways where you can interact with them to make sure that they can get to where they're going, and they know that they have your support. Another one of the 5 key elements is make it visual. Develop a variety of visual tools and artifacts to solidify the goal setting culture. For example, utilizing the SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely acronym to create an effective goal. I was once told by someone I consider to be extremely smart that if you cannot measure it, it cannot be done. Because the only way for you to understand that you're actually getting something done is to figure out a way of how you can measure your success or measure how that is being actually done. So if you're just floating along or you're kind of just moving with the flow, you're not really accomplishing much. But if you set that goal and you're able to measure how to get towards it, you'll be much more effective in getting things done. Make it relevant. Now, this is one I can definitely understand, because do student goals match up with the learning goals for their grade, development level, and them as a person? Making it relevant is something that we can all do, and something you often hear people say is like, "Why am I learning this? What is it going? How is it going to help me in the future when I'm trying to, when I'm out there working. And you hear that all the time. And so by
Mhm.
making it relevant, and I know I can speak for myself when I have conversations with my daughter, and we're talking about homework and we're talking about work. And, we try to make it tie into something that we both are interested in or something we're both experienced. So we can kind of say, okay, I kind of get how that works. An interesting question, Dr. Simmons, and I always say she's 11 years old. She was reading a book today, and someone in the book said they wanted to be an actuary. And so she said, well, Daddy, what does an actuary do? And we started talking about examples of real life examples that she could understand. And then she came back and said, okay, well, if I want to calculate this based on that, then this is how. So, and I was like, yes, these are the types of things that actuaries can do. So it's very easy to take even some complicated things and break them down into ways our children can understand based on their
Mhm.
experiences. And that is a perfect way to kind of talk with them. The last of the five key elements that we have here is center student choice. This is student ownership of the learning. It's maximized when students feel a sense of urgency and choice. Again, all of these things tie in. So when you're talking about making it relevant, you're giving the student an opportunity to own that, to own what it is that they're doing, and they'll be able to come and say, okay, I can see how this now fits in. So when you're talking about doing it often and make it visual, these are the things that your children can utilize in order to improve their awareness and where they want to go with their learning. I was always been taught that children go to school to learn, but they love to learn at home.
Mhm.
That is where the development of learning to loving to learn and figure out things and kind of setting goals for themselves, all of those things are some of those things that start at home and are just refined when they go to school. So with that, I just want to that was a quick welcome. And I know, Dr. Simmons, I know you can expand on some of these things even more so than I could, so I would invite you to have a
Well,
few
Minister,
words.
I think one of the key things that you said, and I think it's very important in goal setting and learning with your children. I mean, you spoke just now that when your daughter asked about the question of an actuary, and think of that in terms of when your children are reading, you're reading to your children or your child, or they're reading to you, but you're going to have a discussion about what you just read about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we get our children to formulate questions about and understanding about what they are reading. So it's not just their fluency, but it's the comprehension of what has been read. And what you just shared just now is a very important exercise that comes with learning with parents, with their children. I mean, we're talking about reading. And yes, reading is fundamental. It is fundamental, but what with it is the important exercise that you just described of asking your child, well, ask the question and have a discussion about, concepts and meaning about what is read. So that's very important. And
I
so,
certainly do agree.
in terms of even, the when you talk about even taking ownership, one of the things in the goal setting, we want our children to take ownership of their learning. And part of taking ownership is also parents and teachers just trusting them to come up with their own ideas about what is being taught. What is their understanding? There's the saying that we must create intellectual and safe spaces for our children in their learning, and that's part of the goal setting, that we want our children to engage in the type of questioning and intellectual safe spaces, that there is no quote unquote stupid question. Sometimes the kids say, well, that's a stupid question, I didn't want to ask it. But there isn't. We want to encourage them to take the ownership, and we want to encourage them to be in that intellectual safe space to ask questions about the things that teachers are delivering, and
Mm-hmm.
parents are asking them, and what you put in front of them. But again, most importantly, trusting them about what they are learning. Have them ask and tell their questions and discuss their questions and their ideas. Very important.
So would you say that now with our children on remote learning, that it's an opportune time for them to sit with their parents and maybe do a visual goal setting exercise? Like they can do maybe a goal setting vision board together, write down some simple goals that they can put into the fridge and just stimulate that connection, especially now that we're at the beginning of a brand new academic school year.
Lisa, you're absolutely correct. Uh, you have to write your goals down. You just kind of talk about what I'm going to do. Write them down, and like you said, put them in a space where no, you see it all the time. Some people put it above their bed, like you said. Some people put it on the refrigerator, but and put it boldly. So no, that is very important. So writing it down enhances the visualization about what you want to achieve. So that is absolutely a must. It isn't enough to just talk about what you want to do in your goals. You must write them down because writing them down helps you to visualize it daily. Yeah. And I even add something else, Alicia and Minister. It's important that you know, I always say, I don't know, Minister, if your child had, I don't know, you may have been the mentor, but who do have your children have who's your mentor? Who's someone who you look at and say, oh, that's who I like, that person I want to become. That's a part of the visualization. Even if that person is your favorite athlete or scientist or whomever, post that person next to your goals, because that helps you with and helps your children understand what their aspirations are all about. Very important.
And I would agree with that, Dr. Simmons, for sure. Unfortunately, I know my daughter's hero used to be LeBron James, because she wanted to be tall, and
Hmm.
she is tall. But I do see, when you look at your children, you can see where the habit forming that comes from being around their parents.
Yeah.
From her mom, she likes to be in the kitchen. Her mom loves to cook. Her mom's a dietitian, so she has she knows a lot about food. For me, she loves to read. She loves to do puzzles. She's now proudly showing me her Sudoku book that she has, and she's working her way through these problems. So I always tell people, encourage your children to do what it is that they want to do. Don't be so caught up with setting boundaries so early with
Hmm.
your children. Allow them to explore. Allow them to find themselves. And trust me, they will. And very quickly, it can be frustrating because they'll go through some things and just be, I don't like, I'm tried it, I don't like it. But you, as a parent, might have been excited about them being into that. But you got to understand, it's not your life. Or
Right.
you, or you're there to guide them and show them and give them the opportunities to explore. Um, but with the remote learning, it's be aware. One thing I do find is sometimes our parents are just not aware, and it's something as simple as take your child's schedule, post it up next to your computer, so you can take a glance at it and say, okay, the math is starting now. Perhaps I can help with that math,
Hmm.
or it's English starting, or Spanish or social studies. I can just peek in and give some advice on that, or even talk about some of the experiences you had as a child when you were going through that, and how you managed to cope with different things and make it through. So there are lots of tips and things that you can do to help your child get through this particular era we find ourselves in. We want our children to be in school, and every child that I've talked to has said, "I want to be back in school," talking to my friends and being in that environment, and we're working towards that. But until we get to that point, we have to work with what we have in front of us.
And if I may add to that, before we go to the next thing, Minister, you mentioned about SMART, and there's a formula that all parents and students can apply. I don't care what age they are, and this is also something that students can put with their goals. Put that in bold also, and
Mm-hmm.
it is is a measure of your success, because we all talk about we want our children to be successful by the end of the school year. We want them to have success throughout the school year, and they need to see those mini successes throughout the school year as they've set those goals. And the formula is smarts. Yes, the word smarts, SMARTS, plus purpose, plus agency. And they say those three, smarts plus purpose plus agency, equals a fully realized student. And what that means is you've set your goals. And if you have added those three as a part of your daily goal setting and living it as a student, as a parent, really, we develop fully realized children, meaning
Mm-hmm.
those children who say what they want to become, they're very focused. By the end of the school year, I'm going to get, two B's, one A, maybe one C. That they're realistic about it, but they become fully realized because they have written it out. They have the smart pieces in there, like you said, Minister, is measurable. How do I know that you did well? You've measured it. So
Mm-hmm.
smart plus purpose plus agency equals a fully realized student. In other words, a student who realized what he or she wants to become based upon the goals that they set. Very important.
Yes, these are some great tips, and it's also a wonderful time to set goals beyond academics. So have your academic goals, but set those personal development goals and work with the parents, students, and parents together so that they can say in which areas they want to flourish and which areas they want to explore. And it would be great to even just include the teacher so that the teacher can go ahead and support that student
Hmm.
throughout the year. So it doesn't have to be something that they make the whole class aware of. But if
Right.
you and your student want to send that to the teacher, and then the teacher can say, "Hey, I remember these are your goals. What are the ways that I can support you?" My son is in primary six, and they did a goal setting exercise, and he was really excited because we do vision boards all the time, but he was able to put them on a vision board, and now every month his teacher is going to check in to see how they're making out. So I
Right.
know that these are things that are happening in the classroom, and as you said earlier, with the guidance counselors at the middle and high school levels, so our children are on the right track.
Let
At
me
this
ask you this question. As the director of academics and as a parent, I mean, you brought it up, which is very important in terms of, you know, how are you as a parent adapting to the virtual, the remote learning? Because I tend to think that probably more of our children are more adaptable than the parents are to remote learning. I think our children eventually get it. Some of them may, be agitated in the beginning, but most of our children are more adaptable to the remote learning than their parents are. So I wanted to know from you as a parent, given what you just described, which is important exercise of the vision learning, how do you adapt as a parent with that?
Personally, I love remote learning because I did do my bachelor's and my master's online. So it was something that my son had been exposed to from young because he watched me go through it.
Hmm.
But I find him, the boy, so he gets bored. So I try to make it very practical for him. We're lucky, like you said, our students, most of them are adaptable with the technology because a lot of them are used to technology, but it's that attention that's kind of the difficult to hone in on. So what I try to do is keep it interesting. So I have a science boy who loves dinosaurs and experiments. So I try to see if any of his work I can make more just like what he likes. And I
Hmm.
also speak with his teachers to see hey, can we incorporate some more hands-on elements? Because my son doesn't just like to sit in front of the computer. He tunes out, like you'll see him just doing all of this, and I'm like, okay, no, we need to bring it back in. And it can be difficult for parents because I'm still working and trying to keep
Hmm.
it remote and balancing. But I find that he's going to feed off of my energy and my attitude. So with my frustrations, I try my best to vent it to adults only and not express any of that around, because our children, they're going to internalize that, right? So having a positive attitude, so waking up and I'm like, hey, we're excited for learning. I might not really be excited, but I'm going to put that for him. And I've noticed that he's like, okay, he's fine with it. Where some of his friends, that the parents are really overwhelmed, and I got every household is different. But he said some of them are having like anxiety because they don't want to ask the parents for help because the parents are doing work and they feel like they're getting in the parents' way and they're falling
Hmm.
behind in class because they're also too shy to speak to their teachers.
Mm.
So I definitely encourage parents to build that network of other parents and adults that you can vent to. Be sure to ask for any help that you can, but try to just keep the positive attitude with the child, because at the end of the day, remote learning is here. It's not ideal, but as we transition through it, the children will adapt and they will develop a positive attitude if we can first model that to them. But they actually kind of like it. Um, I know that it's not great for socializing, but I know that some teachers are utilizing like breakout rooms so that they're able to have this
Right.
moment
Mm-hmm.
of not like it's not nothing to do academically or work wise, but they able to just say, hey friends, what's going on? What's catching up? So I know that I definitely want to give a big shout out to our teachers because they are being very creative in the ways that they are still trying to have that social and academic balance. But definitely us as the adults, we have to model the behavior we want to see in them. So
And that's important. And minister, I know
I was just
you
about to
have a
talk to
young
that.
daughter, so yeah, you have a young, both of you have young children. So the role that the two of you must play is very is key with what we're talking about for many of our parents. Not that we forget what the older students do, because many of them are adept to what online learning and what is referred to. Because there's something that you just said, Alicia, and I know the minister probably does this too, but it gets at what we talk about, creating evidence-based ways parents can think like a teacher
Mm-hmm.
to improve their child's virtual learning. And both of you have been in it as parents of young children. You've had to come with some evidence-based ways to think like their teachers, to think like a teacher, to get your children to not just comply, but to do the work that has been laid out. And you captured some of the things. I mean, I would say with both of you, you probably have created the best space in your household that's possible for your children to learn. And there are parents who may not have that room where they go to where the child just focuses and does his or her learning. Some people have to do it in the kitchen
Yeah.
with other buddies around them. But folk know that there's a certain time when folk are going to be at their kitchen table doing their work. And when you're talking about the evidence-based ways for a parent, I mean, and I think you spoke to it earlier, Alicia, in terms of establishing those rules. Okay. If you're in the kitchen, for example, you can't be in the refrigerator every 5 minutes, for example. You know what I mean? Hey, I want you focused. So those are some of the things that when we're talking about our remote learning, that we must think about. Um, and I think you captured it in terms of, we want parents. No, we want our children. Whenever we talk about remote learning, the minister says, "Hey, we're going to remote learning, people, because of COVID." Well, automatically, we've been doing this now for the last 18, 19 months. Think of where we were 2020 in March. when we said we're going to remote learning. Uh, if you were reflective, there was a lot of helter skelter action and doubt because we were adapting to something that, okay, this is new. But I think we're in a better space now. And we're in a better space now because we rely upon a routine and a system. We have an established routine and a system to stay organized around remote learning as a department, as a ministry, and that's transferred to what you do in your home. So those things are key.
And Dr. Simmons and Alicia, one thing I do want to mention here as a parent, and I talk to parents, and obviously as the minister, I get stopped on the street, I get emails, WhatsApp. It seems like everybody in Bermuda has my phone number, which is not a bad thing. But just because we're in remote learning doesn't necessarily mean that the learning is different. It doesn't necessarily mean that the interaction with the school is different. It's
Mm-hmm.
being done in a different way, but it's still there. And I actually, and I encourage our parents. Just earlier this week, I sent an email because it's interesting how I interact with my daughter's school. Because sometimes it's as the minister, but sometimes it's as a parent. And I have this delineation where I say I'm approaching as a parent today, and I actually sent a message to the school and said, I am really really impressed with the amount of documents that you guys are sending out and how organized everything is. Send your school a note and let them know what they are doing right and what they are doing wrong. Don't always focus on what's not going wrong, because there are a lot of things that are going right. I also encourage parents is your children are watching you. When you're complaining about online, they're taking that on as well. Understand that try and create a positive as possible environment for your children to operate in. You may be frustrated with remote learning, but save that type of conversation. Not for when they're working, but that's a conversation that, and I'm not saying you don't have that conversation with your children, because I encourage parents to talk to their children as much as possible. Let them know the frustrations, but there's a time and a place for that. And so always, we bite your tongue, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and be encouraging during those learning periods. If they were in school, you wouldn't want anyone to disrupt their learning while they're in school, and you'd be upset if there was someone on campus, making a ruckus outside the classroom and disturbing them from actually doing what it is they're supposed to do. Treat their time as valuable time for them to continue the learning. It is, and as you said, Dr. Simmons, it's what we have now, and we're making the best of what we have now. And I think we're doing a really, really good job with what it is that we have.
Yeah.
I've received so many queries from parents about the Chromebooks that we gave out to almost all of our primary school students. As a matter of fact, I got a humorous WhatsApp today from a parent who said, "I'm sitting here with my child. I don't know what school or what age, but they were learning how to use the Chromebook together," which I found
Mhm.
very encouraging. And she was the funny part was that they sent a message and was like, "Oh my God, it's touchscreen. I didn't realize that." Right. And so, and just think of the fun that you can have, by just being entertaining. Because there could have been a different way. There could have been, "Oh my God, why didn't they tell me it was touchscreen?" And how come we don't have more instructions and stuff? But instead of that, both of them were sitting down and kind of working their way through it. And so your children see that, they feel encouraged that you are learning with them, and they get encouraged by that. And it can also lead to just better outcomes for them overall.
Minister, you just communicated actually two other attributes of the virtual learning experience, and that is, we want parents make it meaningful to the students, to your
Hmm.
children, make the learning meaningful, but also play to their strengths. And as you play to their strengths, you'll find out that example that you just gave was a great example uh, of learning the use of the Chromebook together. And like I said earlier, I mean, 9 times out of 10, as they're learning it together, those parents are playing off the strengths of their children who probably know that device a little better than they do,
Uh-huh.
right? So you play to their strengths, empower them with what they know and what they can do, and at the same time, you're catching them uh, doing something that they're good at.
Yep.
and you're celebrating that, man. That's so important, you know. And Alicia, earlier, like we were talking probably before the show, you know, you're getting them to embrace a growth mindset. Now your son, your daughter is looking at this and saying, not only do I know how to master this device that has been handed to me, uh, you know, they are also in their goal setting, shaping their learning around what the teacher has there as an objective and their learning outcome. So it's very important when we talk about some of these attributes of the virtual learning experience. And sounds like the two of you, you're doing some of that. And I was smiling as the two of you were talking because it had. This is another thing that we must share with our parents, and probably that's a separate show altogether, just for parents, because parents, as the two of you were talking, I was profiling you. I was profiling you and saying, okay, and all of us as parents have these parental traits and parental roles. But both of you were talking about what you model for your children. And that's so important. And 9 times out of 10, when we're talking about these, you know, they talk about in the formula 8 parental roles. And I've listened to you in this short segment that we've been talking, and there are 8. And I've heard you all articulate at least 5 of them. And if we keep going on, they're going to come out. And I want to share them because they're very important for parents as they talk about taking their children toward not just goal setting, but also when we're talking about remote learning. Who are you as a parent? The younger your child is, you're going to be that early learning partner. Think of it. When your child was 1, 2, 3, 4, you were right there with him or her
Yep.
doing everything you were at. The older they get, the older you're doing some things. Now, that early learning partner, you're only doing it when you're called upon. So you become more of the flight engineer. Now, I'm going to help you when I need to help you. Right? There are some things now you're going to do for yourself. Right? Child calls you, what do you become? You become the fixer. That's another
Yep.
level. Okay. He or she is struggling with certain things, and you become the fixer, showing them, okay, this is how it's done, da, da, da. Then there's the revealer. And Minister, you articulated some of that in terms of you know, when your daughter was asking about an actuary, you know, you revealed, let's investigate. You became a philosopher. You know, those are the things that we as parents do with our children, especially when they're young. As they get older, we take on some of the other attributes. You know, we model a lot of the behavior. We hope, and we want to model a lot of the positive behaviors that you spoke about, Alicia.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the things. But again, the negotiator. You know, your son doesn't want to do his board. His board with this remote learning, man. I want to do something else now. You know, I've done all that my teacher asked me, and you got a day's work that finished in half a day. What you can
Now
do
what do you
with
do?
him? What you can do with him for the rest of the day? You're gonna say to him, "Well, I need you to read this book," or if you're gonna be like a parent or a grandparent who called me early in the week when she was told that, oh, she's on duty because everyone else has to go to work. She has to have the 5-year-old. And so she took the 5-year-old through exercises up from 9 capital and routine from 9 o'clock until 3. And then after 3, hey, we're finished all of our work. They've been fishing. You know, they've been
Balance,
fishing.
balance.
Yeah,
Yep.
they've been fishing. So that's all part of the modeling and the negotiating, all of those things. But all of us, become those GPS navigational voice in our children's heads. Uh, you're going to be that time when you can walk away from everything. You ain't got to be present because you're always in their head. They hear that little voice. They go over here.
Mhm.
Okay, well, should I really engage? I know. Let me stay focused. That GPS voice is in their head. So these are some of the other things that we can talk about and share with our children as they are engaged in their remote learning, and as they are exercising and working towards building upon their goals. And I think the two of you really have communicated some very aspirational, positive things that you're doing with your own children.
I see a good comment has come in
Yeah,
to create an environment slash space within the home for the kids to learn, keep the routine the same daily so the child knows the expectations. So you did touch
absolutely.
on this earlier, Dr. Simmons, and understandably every household is different, so some people might not
Mhm.
have a large space to be able to designate. Maybe it, like you said, might be the kitchen table. But what I find is the intention behind it. So even if they just have their pencil case, their device, a piece of paper, maybe find a little sticky note that you can stick onto their device with a positive affirmation telling them focus to do their best. It's really the small acts of intention that are going to help to
Mhm.
motivate that student to get really into it. And by keeping the same routine, maybe make them wake up, brush their teeth, get dressed. Pajamas kind of reduce productivity, so maybe still have them in that routine of getting ready for school so that it still feels as if they're in school and serious. If someone's super committed and want to wear their uniforms, great. But if
Hmm.
they're in,
Yeah,
their first day of school, especially for like our P1s or middle schoolers, I did see a lot of parents dress their children up because they wanted to have that.
yeah. That's all
Yeah.
part of the first day.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's all part of the first
All
day.
part of the first day. Very important. Very important.
And some other tips. I know I had a conversation with another parent. As I said, I do speak with parents, and one of the things it really stood out to me was they had asked about community service.
Mm.
Dr. Simmons and Alicia. It's and and they said, well, since we're in this pandemic, why do we still? Well, how can we do community service? And I said, there just because, and as I said earlier, just because we're in remote learning doesn't mean we're not doing things what we shouldn't be doing. That we're not doing anything. We're just doing it differently. And I said, community service could be you calling up Matilda Smith and saying, hey, I like to have a Zoom session and read to the residents over
That's
Zoom.
right. That's
That's
a great
community
example.
service. That, that-
That's
that's
a
that's community.
that's a
So
great
so
example.
these are the types of things, and so when our children are being seen by our adults saying, well, we can't go out and pick up trash because we're not supposed to be outside, or you can't go and do this with your friends because you're not supposed to be able to do that. Brainstorm about other ways of accomplishing the same things, and
Hmm.
you get your child start to think more along the lines of not what is the status quo, but what is it that I could do differently that still accomplishes the same thing that needs to be accomplished.
Right.
That critical thinking, developing that critical thinking within our children. And I know that Dr. Simmons, and this is something that is when we talk about education reform, that's right there at the top of the list, is creating an environment where our children just think differently than say what's just put in front of them, and they just kind of do it.
Yeah.
We want them to learn, but we want them to also understand why they're learning,
And
because this
question.
is their
They have
learning,
to
and
question.
they have to question it.
And part of this also is, and I'll say this here, and it's to all the parents who are listening. I mean, if we're talking about developing our children's critical thinking, you cannot develop your child's critical thinking if they're not writing.
No.
And I know folk will say, I don't like writing, but I'm going to say to you, you cannot fully develop your child's critical thinking if you don't write about that which you think about. You got to write about it.
You know,
And not,
you,
and it's the example, it goes back, minister, to the example that you gave again. If you're reading it, you discuss it. Now you
mhm.
say to your daughter, I want you go and find out some more about this, and write me just a paragraph about what you learned about an actuary.
That reminds me of a time we had. She asked me how do boats float, and I said, "Go find out yourself. You know how to get on your Chromebook and do that sort of thing, and then tell me how it is." And we had this conversation, and I learned some things about how boats float that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know before. But encourage them, get them just spark it, just have that spark with them, and they'll go and they'll figure it out for sure. It's now I see Alicia that there's wants that Gombe dancing needs to be integrated into physical education.
Yes.
That's cultural. That's something cultural, and I like the idea, and I like the ideas that were being brought forth.
Well, let's even think of that. It doesn't have to be just physical education, you know, because I, as a former teacher of social studies, teaching history, we actually would demonstrate. Talk to me about the snake dance and about a gombe, the different dances, and students would demonstrate that. So it doesn't have to be solely something that you integrate into a particular or any one lesson. Uh, you know, it's thinking what we call in teaching a cross curricular approach to things. It's gumbays can be, you can teach it in any lesson. You can teach it in mathematics, right? So it's what we call integrated teaching or interdisciplinary teaching. Yeah.
These have
How are we
been
looking, Alicia? How are we looking? How are we looking for time?
so we have about a minute left.
Wow.
Just a minute? Wow, that went by.
But we can, if we have a few things that we want to
Well, there are,
wrap up.
what's the questions like? Any questions?
So we didn't have any questions. We just had just some positive encouragement, feedback, comments. But I can expand on some questions that we had
Say
coming
hi to
through.
Bermuda, Layla.
Layla, some questions that were coming in and just over social media. So I know a lot of parents, touching on the difficulty of managing remote learning and still having full work requirements. The financial aspect of not being able to work, that household strain, the feeling of overwhelm for parents that have students at multiple, levels and ages. Now we do have the Chromebook, so that should alleviate some of the problems that we've seen around devices. But with all of those comments said, I will opine and just say that it's not easy, and I know that the department and the ministry are aware of that. However, there are resources to help parents as well as students. So, just a reminder to reach out to school counselors. I know a lot of times people think of counselors and they might think of behavioral issues, but you don't need to wait until there is some sort of issue. The counselors are there to support your students. So I know last year they did a Zoom session where it was if you need any help with goal setting or studying or scheduling, anything, they were there. If the student just needed someone to vent to and speak to, they were there. I know that teachers are very open as well, so I know it can feel alone at times if you don't have support within your household. But Bermuda is a village, so these are the times that we really need to pull into that village. So if you have the godparents, the friends, even just other parents within the class, see how you can support. I know one student in my son's class, his mom's like, I'm horrible at math, so I try to do Zoom with him a few times a month to see how I can assist. But just don't be afraid to ask for help. You never know who is going through the same situation that you are, or who could be able to support you. It's like we said a million times, it's not ideal to be in remote, but we are living through a global pandemic. We don't have an end date, so we don't know, when we're going to return to normal, if or what normal even really will be. So getting used to this and being able to just have that growth mindset, as Dr. Simmons said is going to help our children to really thrive with it. And as you know, we're living in a technology world, so they're going to have to be online anyways, more and more as you know the years come about. So
Hmm.
just finding the positives in it and knowing that there is support. So don't be afraid to ask for help if it's a day that you might feel overwhelmed with work. You know, even expressing that to their teachers to see what type of support their teachers can offer you. And yeah, it's support is there. The ministry is there. The minister is there. If you want to email in, if you have specific questions, you just type it in your email address, minister, if you don't mind.
minister@moed.bm.
To email it over to the ministry, and yeah, utilize the resources that are available. We do look forward to having another session, just discussing more about mental and emotional well-being. But until
Mhm.
then, do reach out if there are academic questions. Their teacher, Dr. Simmons. Um, yeah, we are here to support our parents, and we are not blind to the plight. So definitely go ahead and get the support that is needed. We will be posting these tips onto our social media accounts. So that'll be the Ministry of Education's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And I know that the Commissioner of Education sends out the Scoop, which is an email newsletter. So if parents are not registered for that, go ahead and ask your teacher about how you can start to receive that because she as well sends out tips and personal messaging. But I will hand it over to Dr. Simmons and then the minister, and you can wrap us up for the evening.
Now, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share with our listening audience and recognize that we're going forward with the transformation of education. And you hear people say reform, but I call it the transformation. Um, to reform is to look at what it was and reform what was. Now, we're going to improve upon what was. And I know Minister is committed to the same task. So I want to thank you for the opportunity and welcome me back anytime or invite me
And
back anytime.
And I
Yeah.
want to thank you, Dr. Simmons. Thank you, Ms. Trott, for hosting us, and thank Bermuda for tuning in. It is our inaugural. We are hoping to see our audience grow as we move forward, and we'll have more topical topics to discuss. I hope were able to take away some of the tips that we did share. It was very enlightening that we actually had two parents who are going through remote learning with children in our public school system online as well. So we relate. We relate to exactly what you're going through because just because I'm the minister of education doesn't mean that I'm not here playing teacher on the days when my daughter's with me and she's doing remote over there while I'm sitting over here doing my work. And so I know exactly what we're going through. I know exactly how you feel. We are working diligently. We're working very hard to get to a point where schools can return to in-person learning. Um, we encourage you to sign up for the saliva screening program. That is an important additional layer to help us keep our schools, our children, and our staff safe. But with that, I just want to thank you, Bermuda, for tuning in. I look forward to um, being back with you in 2 weeks. And until then, please, God bless, be safe, and have a good night.
Yes, good night, Bermuda.